Time to rant about the sequel trilogy again. I grew up with the prequel trilogy, and barring some issues with how dated the special effects are, one of the things that always stood out was the worlds. Say what you want about the plot, there are certainly a lot to say, but the care they put into the designs of the world cannot be understated. This is especially true of the ship designs. There was a lot of creativity. After all, these would be marketed for LEGO and other set collectors. Notice how early in the War the Jedi starfighters resembled those of the A-Wings from the Rebel Alliance. As the Clone Wars progressed, we see a shift. The starfighters now resemble TIE fighters, symbolic about how the Republic was turning into the Empire. Yeah, so this is how Liberty dies with thunderous applause. So when Disney announced the new Star Wars movie, I was quite excited to see these new worlds. Besides the films, there were a lot of other places that got creative with the worlds. The Clone Wars dominated basically all of Star Wars at the time of Disney's purchase. So we got a lot of creative worlds, such as how Mandalore was inspired by this blocky biodome cubist Pablo Picasso art direction. Then we get worlds like Umbara, which is the shadow world with its technology far above the galactic standard. But Clone Wars set the bar high for how creative we could possibly be with these worlds. So what exactly did the sequel trilogy present us? Well, The Force Awakens had Jakku, which was a desert ship graveyard. Okay, cool. Then we get the Hosnian system, which is a city planet, so basically Coruscant 2.0, and that gets blown up. Then we get Takodana, which is a forested world, and Vindakar, which is a planet full of rolling hills that has a resistance base. Then there's Starkiller Base. Yeah, this is Ilum. I will give The Last Jedi credit because I do like the planets in The Last Jedi better than the rest of the sequel trilogy. The whole salt planet of Krayt, where breaking the surface gives a sense of symbolic blood, is visually cool, even though this is basically Hoth 2.0. Can't say I liked Octo that much, but hey, it is lore relevant. And Canto Bight basically reminded me of places like Naboo in the prequel trilogy. Okay, so what about The Rise of Skywalker? Oh boy. Pasaana is yet another desert planet because of course we need another desert planet. Except this time they're not paying the Tunisian government to film. No. They're paying the Jordanian government to film. Kijimi. Sure. Nice to see the First Order kidnap children on this crime-ridden mountain snow world before it blew up and nobody really gave a crap about it. Agent Claus, woohoo, a jungle world but no features other than the Tantive 4. I'm sorry, how is this exactly a good art direction? Mustafar. Yes, this is actually Mustafar. How is it suddenly growing all these trees? Well, you'd have to read supplementary material, but then again, I would normally complain about reading supplementary materials for plot-relevant stuff, but at the same time, Mustafar is such a footnote in this that most people didn't know it was actually Mustafar. Then the Death Star wreckage. Glad it's on an ocean world and not a desert world, because of course they would try to do a desert world. I wouldn't be surprised if there was concept art of the Death Star wreckage landing on a desert world in order to complete the cycle of, hey, let's go back to Jakku. Then Exegol. It's a desert planet. Woohoo! With storms. And this is somehow an ancient throne world of the Sith. Seriously. I think we can all see the problem with these worlds. They're just so insipid. The sequel trilogy has a paper-thin plot that necessitates us being on the fringes of the galaxy. Okay, being on the fringes of the galaxy is fine. Plot, debatable. Granted, it's bad, but fringes of the galaxy, fine. The problem is that these worlds aren't interesting in the slightest. In some cases, like Pasaana, aka the desert in Jordan, they've actually sacrificed being interesting for the sake of ease of filming. I mean, why would you do that? Why? I mean, look at this. This is the concept art for Pasaana. Yes, the same Pasaana which they filmed in the Jordanian desert. So, they gave up a water world for just another desert planet. And while we have our fair share of water worlds, such as Mon Cala and Camino, this one did have some unique features, such as possibly people living on the boats. We do know that there are swamp areas here, such as these huts, which people would be dwelling in. And honestly, I think this would be a visually much more interesting section of the movie than just looking at the desert again, because of course, we need to find our way into the middle of the desert, because Star Wars. And to those saying, well, why don't I give this same level of scrutiny to the, I don't know, original trilogy? Here's the thing. The original Star Wars, I think, came out in the 70s, 77, I believe, and the next Star Wars film wouldn't come out until the 80s, and that trilogy would be completed in the 80s. I give them a little bit more leeway to the single biome worlds because there were technical and budgetary limitations. I think Empire, in particular, was known for going over budget, and I think the Norway scenes for Hoth were so snowy that basically they actually used shots of Mark Hamill just walking out the door. Can I say the same for the prequel trilogy, other than the shots looking dated? No. For the sequel trilogy, in like 2015 to 2019, absolutely not. I'm also aware that the Clone Wars wasn't always throwing unique planets at us left and right. It couldn't. It's like a 100-episode show. But at the same time, Jungle, Crime Hole, Mountain, there were some actually interesting worlds there. I can't help but recall the more creative worlds. This is especially true since the planets on your screen right now, Ilum, literally appears in the sequel trilogy and gets destroyed without much fanfare. Wait, you don't remember Ilum from the sequel trilogy? How could you not? It appeared in the Clone Wars. Hell, it appeared in the literal first movie of the sequel trilogy. Yes, I am of course talking about Starkiller Base. Starkiller Base is Ilum. And, nobody really cared when it was destroyed. They couldn't have, shown a village burnt out by the First Order to show off their depravity, or was the whole blowing up Hosnian Prime good enough? And they couldn't have just iconoclast the Jedi statues and temple there in order to do anything that calls it back to the First Order desecrating tradition while claiming to be the heirs to tradition. I mean, it would be a thematically appropriate message, considering the First Order is trying to restore the Empire, and what the Empire did was destroy the Jedi before they did the whole let's declare the Empire thing, but I'm getting off topic. It's like my issue with the ships. There's little in the way of deeper lore or characterization for these planets. And frankly, the lore of these places are the only things holding them together, like Ahch-To, since the visuals really aren't, because it's just mostly a water world with some islands and the first Jedi Temple is here. That's pretty much just it. Or just the visual direction isn't that good. I'm surprised the stormy desert world was the aesthetic they went with for Exegol. Dromund Kaas was perfectly fine as a stormy world of the dark side, and it had settlements, like actual cities. It was the capital of the Sith Empire in Legends at one point. And jungles and forests. You'd really expect them to have more jungle planets, with especially how much this trilogy likes forested areas. I mean, this is the throne world of the Sith, your main antagonist for all 9 movies. You really would think they would put more thought into this aesthetic of the whole thing, but we really only see the desert and a single citadel. They could have had basically this world be a giant hostile jungle filled with giant carnivorous plants that sits in the darkness of the everlasting storm. Imagine if the Sith citadel was made out of the corpse of a giant sarlacc. Or maybe it was a living sarlacc, and they had to hold it together and prop open its jaws using these mechanical devices. But, like everything else in the sequel trilogy, it tries to retread the original trilogy, but it ultimately forgot that it's not the 80s anymore, and the perception and expectations of Star Wars have shifted. It's an attempt to snap back what wasn't going to happen again. You can't get to lightning in a bottle twice. In fact, trying to snap back to JJ's vision is why Rise of Skywalker sucked in the first place. Thank you for listening to this Star Wars rant. Please consider liking, subscribing, tipping the channel on Ko-fi. This is Cyril signing off.